The introduction of AI in Moldex3D, new GD&T tools, a 3D wellline results, and a view cube? Please sit back and enjoy this quick breakdown of all of what's new in Moldex3D 2025. You can check out the QR code here and at the end of the video for a more comprehensive breakdown. The development vision of Moldex3D falls into three categories: automation, optimization, and intelligence, something that we have coined as AOI. And this allows us to start incorporating AI and other optimization tools into Moldex3D to make the simulation workflow as easy and efficient as possible. One of these tools is the API function. The API function helps us to remove some of the redundancy by automating features in the modeling, meshing, and simulation setup. The O side of AOI is optimization, and the DOE function has existed for a long time to help us with the optimization of certain features and certain parameters in a simulation. And the I side of intelligence is being implemented in this DOE tool to help us make the DOE more efficient and less rigid. The current DOE function calls for multiple data points to be input by the user. Those data points are set up as individual runs to test all the permutations of the different variables. The difference with the AI optimization wizard is that you're going to input a maximum and a minimum for the range that you'd like to test. And then this AI tool will help to test a bunch of values in that range. As you can see down here, for maximum injection pressure, we have several iterations within a certain range of the temperatures that were called out for this DOE. And so you can use this feature to test within a certain range much more effectively than something like the DOE wizard. As an output from the DOE, we used to have just this parallel coordinates plot, which honestly a lot of users would skip over because it was a little bit confusing. But now there's something that's very useful in this parallel coordinates plot, and that is interaction. So once the DOE has been run, and this is either through the standard DOE or through the AI optimization tool, you can now click on the sliders for the control variables and see what the resulting output would look like on the quality factors. Two new GD&T tools have been added to Moldex3D. One of them is perpendicularity, where we'll define a plane, and then you'll select a surface, and then we'll define the perpendicularity to that selected plane. Parallelism works in a similar way, except instead of it being a perpendicular, it'll be a parallel type of measurement. Something that we're very excited to announce is the existence of weld-line surfaces. Typically in Moldex3D, we display these weld lines as one-dimensional lines on the part surface, which will still be there. If you enjoy those weld lines on the surface, they do give satisfactory amount of information. However, if you enable the weld line particle tracer from the computation parameters, this will give you a new result called weld surface. This will show the surface that's created by those weld line particles as they progress through the geometry. This will give a better representation of any sort of visual defects that you might see on the surface of the part. The outputting of weld lines has also been improved when we're trying to export the weld lines to FEA. One of the issues was always how much of a reduction in the mechanical strength should we be applying, which we usually applied through a criteria that would be user defined. But now in Moldex3D 2025, we are going to define material variables that would be the yield strength, the tangent modulus, and the ultimate strength. These would correspond to information that you would extract from a stress strain curve. And then the modulus distribution that's output is going to be more accurate to the weld line strength reduction in reality. If you don't know what these three values are, you can always send us the stress strain curve and we can extract those three values for you. Over in the Home tab, we're going to see a new item called the result criteria setting. This allows users to define criteria for a go or no-go condition in your results simulation outputs. And so if I have, for example, a pressure and I want to stay underneath a certain pressure result, I can put that in here. And then in my result tree, there will be a check mark or a red X telling me whether or not that criteria has been satisfied. This result criteria will be exportable, so you can share this result criteria with your team, and so that everybody's working with the same criteria. You can also create multiple criteria lists and switch between them as you wish. There's now a studio embedded compact project wizard. This tool has always existed, but it's been outside of the studio interface. It helps to reduce the file size of our projects by removing some unnecessary files. There's three types of files that this tool will remove: temporary files, exchange files, and intermediate time output files. Temporary and exchange files you can always remove, but the intermediate time step output files you want to consider keeping if you want to see your time steps. That's what these refer to, is the time steps that are output in your simulation. You can choose to keep the important time steps, things like your VP switch, or for advanced processes, things like compression switch or gas switch, or other important time steps such as that. You can choose to keep those important time steps. And then after this compact has been completed, you have the option to compress the project. So this is a great tool that allows us to reduce our file size and manage our projects more efficiently and effectively. A new cooling channel loop wizard has been added into Moldex3D. This doesn't introduce any new features. All these features have been in Moldex3D. However, this cooling channel loop wizard helps to condense the tools that are necessary for cooling channel extraction into one singular interface, so you can work with them more effectively and reduce the amount of noise that is created by some of the other functions in the tool tab of Moldex. We now have the option to include thermal pins into our analysis. Thermal pins allow us to place a mold insert into a cooling channel. Up until this point, we've pretty much only been able to put a mold insert up to the surface of the cooling channel, but this function now allows us to embed the mold insert into the cooling channel, giving us a better thermal representation of the effect of a thermal pin. And some other usability enhancements. In the preferences, you'll be able to adjust your mouse controls. Previously, we just had the keyboard shortcuts, those were adjustable, but the mouse controls were not really adjustable. So now, if you go into your preferences menu, you can change what system you want your mouse controls to apply to, and you can also create a user-defined mouse control mapping. We've added a view cube into Moldex 3D. That's probably the first thing that you'll see when you open up Moldex 3D 2025. There is a view cube that allows for view manipulation and is a welcome addition to the Moldex3D UI. We have customizable and importable template settings. So like I was mentioning earlier with the result criteria, you can import or even export your result criteria, and you can import that into this new verification template. This also includes things like result lists, which was introduced in Moldex3D 2024, result settings, result notes, PowerPoint report templates, Excel report templates. You can import all of this information all at the same time. And so you can use that as a template going forward. Similar to a lot of other functions in Moldex3D, you can have multiple verification templates and switch between those at will. We also have a new dynamic unit control for our results. Rather than having to go to the preferences every time to change your units, there's going to be a drop down for all of the results in Moldex3D to change between the viable unit systems that are available for that particular result. In this case, you can see that we have pressure results, but this also works for things like temperature, flow rate, etc. In addition to this, over in your preferences menu, you can set up a dual unit display. So you can have PSI and MPa output simultaneously. Fiber orientation will have a new 3D display. Instead of it being a vectorized result, the new 3D display will have a smoother calculation and optimized performance for outputting this fiber orientation result. You can change the visual characteristics of this output setting in your preferences. When importing a CAD geometry, if that CAD geometry had a color representation in your CAD system, that color representation will now be maintained coming into Moldex 3D. And so instead of Moldex 3D just importing as a bunch of uncolored, unattributed objects, now a user-defined setting will be applied automatically to group these objects based on their color. You can change or clear the colors from the model tree. This will help to organize that information more effectively. We have a new checkbox over in the display tab for symmetry model. So if you include symmetry into your simulation, after you apply symmetry, those models kind of disappear and you don't see them at all. So now over in the display tab, we have a checkbox for the symmetry model, so you can show that symmetry setting during the simulation setup or after the simulation is completed. And then finally, in the process, under the advanced setting, we have a new restriction for clamping force that will allow us to prevent the simulation from going over a certain clamping force. In CIE mode, this will be deactivated, but users can activate it if they like. In machine mode, this will be activated automatically based on the machine characteristic. All right, and that's a nice brief overview of what's new in 2025. You can use the QR code here to see a more comprehensive breakdown, and we're excited to release the Moldex3D 2025 version in the middle of July.